Hello everyone, welcome back to another Project Gladiator weather forecast. Today I'll be covering the weather for September 12th of 2023, and currently we do have three main regions for severe thunderstorm development. We do have a marginal threat for southeastern Pennsylvania into western New Jersey. That does extend all the way south, as far south as northern Georgia. We also do have a marginal threat for southern Georgia into central Florida for a vast majority of the Florida Peninsula. We also do have a marginal threat for southern Arizona into southwestern New Mexico. As for threats for today, we do have a 2% tornado threat for southeastern Pennsylvania into central Maryland. We also do have a multiple 5% wind threats, one for each of the various marginal threats. And we also do have two different 5% hail threats, one for southern Arizona into southwestern New Mexico, as well as a 5% hail threat for southern Georgia into central Florida. As for our main threats, we do have a additional 2% tornado threat. However, our main threats for today are going to be our wind and hail potentials, with, of course, the additional 2% tornado threat. Taking a look at the tropics, primarily focusing on Hurricane Lee. I know that some of you guys may have some questions on Hurricane Lee, and I'm going to be covering a vast majority of those questions. I will be touching on Hurricane Lee a little bit more in depth on the second half of today's forecast. However, as of right now, we do not have any potential whatsoever of Hurricane Lee impacting North Carolina. The main regions that Hurricane Lee is going to impact is going to be anywhere from Maine into Connecticut, including the states of Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. Currently, I think Hurricane Lee is either a Category 3 or a Category 4, and if it's a Category 3, it is expected to strengthen back into a Cat 4 for a short amount of time, and then continue to weaken from there. As it begins to trek northward, it is going to encounter a little bit of wind shear, so it is going to weaken significantly and impact the New England region as more of a weekend Cat 1 or a tropical storm. We are expected to see some minor impacts across Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. However, we could see some more direct impacts across Maine. And of course, again, I will be going more in depth on those on the second half of today's forecast. But overall, our main potentials and threats from Hurricane Lee, as it does impact the New England region, which is going to be on the early morning of Sunday, we are going to see the main potential of flash flooding, the potential of very heavy rainfall, and maybe some strong wind gusts, but overall the main threat of flash flooding. Taking a look at a radar Omega model, starting off with our 500 millibars like we usually do, focusing on the southern Arizona into southwestern New Mexico marginal threat. You can see that we do have the subtropical jet coming out of the Pacific, and it is going to stall across the southwestern United States. We do have a little bit of ridge across the western United States, which is going to be pushing that subtropical jet into the southwestern United States. It is going to stall across the southwestern United States, as I did cover in the weekly overlook. It is going to lead to rounds of severe thunderstorms anywhere from Arizona into western Texas. We are expected to see some elongated photographs from this across Arizona and New Mexico, leading to the possibility of some small to medium hail. However, compared to western Texas and New Mexico, we don't really have mountains to the west and then just plains, so we aren't really expected to see all that much of some severely elongated photographs. However, some of the lower level winds may be blocked by some of the mountains across this region. However, it is fairly mountainous across this entire region, so overall we could see some elongated photographs, but overall not too severe elongated photographs compared to what we would see across Texas and New Mexico. But we could see the possibility of small to medium hail across this region and the threat of damaging winds with the storms across this region as well. But then if we take a look at the marginal threat for Florida, you can see that we do have a little bit of a shortwave trough that is making its way across Florida. It is fairly weak with mid-level flow that is going to be ranging anywhere from the 30 to 25 miles per hour. So it is going to be fairly weak overall, but we could see the potential of maybe some elongated photographs and the potential for some damaging winds and the possibility of small to medium hail across this region. As well as the marginal threat for the eastern United States, you can see that we do have this trough that is making its way across the Ohio River Valley out of Canada. It does have a cold front attached to it, which is going to be the primary triggering factor across this region. And with the cold front being the primary triggering factor, we aren't really expected to see all that much of a possibility for a hail. Some level flow may lead to maybe some very small hail across this region in some isolated regions. However, our main threat for this marginal threat is going to be damaging winds and that 2% tornado threat for the northern part of that marginal threat region. But overall, our main potential and threat we are going to see from this is going to be damaging winds, and of course that 2% tornado threat for the northern part of that marginal threat. Taking a look at our dew points, focusing on the Florida marginal threat for now, you can see that we do have some fairly strong dew points across this region. We typically do see some fairly strong dew points across this region. We are expected to see dew points that are going to be ranging anywhere from the 70s. However, some of the moisture is being used up by the storms across this region, so that's why you see this major dip in dew points across the marginal threat. So we are going to see overall main dew points and widespread dew points of the 70s, getting anywhere from the low to mid and upper 70s, which will definitely lead to some fairly strong instability across this region. We could see a pretty strong instability across this region and support the possibility of damaging winds and small to medium hail. And then if we take a look at the marginal threat for the eastern United States, you can see that cold front in that trough has been pushing a lot of the moisture eastward, and it is going to push the vast majority of that moisture out into the Atlantic Ocean. And you can see that we do have dew points that are going to be ranging anywhere from the upper 60s into the low 70s, and possibly the mid 70s in some regions as well. This is going to lead to some fairly strong instability across this region as well, maybe a little bit less compared to Florida, as we do have stronger dew points down there. But overall, we are expected to see some fairly strong instability across that region. But then if we take a look at the marginal threat for southern Arizona into southwestern New Mexico, you can see that we do have some fairly strong dew points here as well. We do have a lot of that moisture coming out of the Gulf between Baja California and Mexico. A lot of that moisture is coming out of that Gulf, and it is going to lead to some fairly strong dew points across this region. Dew points are going to be ranging anywhere from the mid 50s and upper 50s, as far high as the low and possibly the mid 70s, which will definitely lead to some strong instability. However, we aren't expected to see instability that is going to be crazy strong like we could see across Florida in the eastern United States. We are expected to see much more moderate instability across this region, as we do have much more weaker moisture across this region because we are in a more desertous region. Taking a look at our temperatures, mainly focusing on the cold front, you can see that we do have that cold front that is associated with that trough, and you can see that it is going to be the primary triggering factor for these severe thunderstorms across this region. However, behind that cold front, we are expected to see a major drop in temperatures. We are expected to see daytime temperatures across the Ohio River Valley and even into the Central Plains that are going to be getting as low as the low 70s and possibly the upper 60s, but more so the mid 70s across the Central Plains, and getting as low as what seems to be the 50s, and possibly getting very close to the 40s across the Central Plains and northern Central Plains, and getting as low as the 40s and the low 50s across the Ohio River Valley. So we are expected to see a major drop in temperatures with that cold front that moves through, and with some of the storms that we had across Texas. We do have major cooling across Texas. We are expected to see a major drop in temperatures. We did see temperatures that were going to be in 100 and above across the vast majority of the Central Plains, but you can see that has gone away since because of the storms and that cold front that has passed through. So we are expected to see major cooling across the United States for a large portion of this week. Taking a look at our instability, focusing on the marginal threat for Florida first, you can see that we do have some fairly strong instability, and it is likely going to be the strongest out of any other marginal threat that we take a look at for today. We are expected to see some Cape values that are going to be ranging anywhere from the 3000s into the low and mid 2000s. However, you can see that we do have a huge drop of instability across central Florida. It is going to be associated with ongoing storms in this current stand of this radar Omega model. However, I can't really go further back, so we are expected to just live with what we have. So we are expected to see some fairly strong instability across this region, which will definitely support the possibility of damaging winds and the possibility of small to medium hail with our elongated photographs. And then if we take a look at the marginal threat for the eastern United States, you can see that we do have some weaker instability compared to Florida. We are expected to see Cape values that are going to be ranging anywhere from the triple digits into the 2000s range, possibly getting into the mid 2000s across some portions of the marginal threat. But then if we take a look at the marginal threat for southern Arizona and southwestern New Mexico, you can see that we are expected to have instability that is going to be making its way out of that gulf between Baja California and Mexico. That is going to be not only bringing moisture but also instability as well. You can see we have tons of instability in that gulf that is going to be blowing over into this marginal threat region. And you can see that we are expected to see Cape values are going to be ranging anywhere from the 1000s into the triple digits, as well as getting into the low 3000s in this very small pocket across southern Arizona. However, more realistically, we could see some widespread triple digits into mid and upper 1000s, as well as some mid and upper 2000s. This is definitely going to support the possibility of some damaging winds and small to medium hail with our elongated photographs across this region. And then as for the marginal threat for eastern United States, let's go back there. You see with the instability that we have, we could definitely see the possibility of damaging winds. And then as for that 2% tornado threat, you can see that we do have some instability out of the Atlantic Ocean, which will definitely support the possibility of that 2% tornado threat with some of the directional shear that we are gaining from that trough that is moving through the region. Taking a look at our energy helicity index, focusing on the 2% tornado threat, this is going to be the final thing that we cover today as far as severe weather, and then I will be going into Hurricane Lee. You can see that we do have some energy helicity index readings that are going to be indicative of that 2% tornado threat. However, they are going to be a little bit further south compared to that 2% tornado threat. We may be able to see a little bit of a southward shift in that 2% tornado threat in the future. However, we could definitely see the possibility of one or two brief tornadoes across this region. The SPC may have a reason for having the 2% tornado threat up there. However, a lot of the energy helicity index readings are suggesting it's going to be a little bit to the south. But overall, we could definitely see the possibility of one or two brief tornadoes across this region. So do keep that in mind if you do live across this region. But overall, our main threats coming from these various marginal threats are going to be damaging winds and small to medium hail. And then let's take a look at Hurricane Lee. Let's start off with the path that Hurricane Lee is going to take. You can see if you do live in North Carolina and Virginia and South Carolina, you are going to be relatively safe from Hurricane Lee. Hurricane Lee is not going to be anywhere close to North Carolina. We may be able to see maybe a little bit of some higher tides and maybe some rip current from Hurricane Lee across North Carolina and South Carolina, but overall that's going to be the majority of the impacts. We aren't expected to see anything else from Hurricane Lee across North Carolina, Virginia, and South Carolina, so you are going to be fairly safe from Hurricane Lee. I know that some of the models like 2 weeks ago were it's suggesting that it could come close to North Carolina, South Carolina, and maybe parts of Virginia, but as of now, it doesn't look that way anymore. You can see that the models are going to suggest that Hurricane Lee is going to make its way northward, but as I did mention, that trough in that cold front that is triggering severe thunderstorms for that marginal threat across the eastern United States today is expected to continue its eastward trek out into the Atlantic Ocean. As you can see, we do have a line of thunderstorms across the coast of the eastern United States, just a little bit out to shore. And you can see by the time that does impact Hurricane Lee, it is you can see that line of storms here just for clarity, but by the time that line of storms does impact Hurricane Lee, it is going to introduce a bunch of wind shear into the Atlantic Ocean. And if you don't know, wind shear is a hurricane's kryptonite. Think about it this way: if you put your hand on a conveyor belt, but the conveyor belt is moving faster than your body, say on like a escalator, and you have to put your hand on the conveyor belt that goes up. Say that conveyor belt that you put your hand on is moving faster than the conveyor belt that you're standing on. So your body is going to be tugged up faster than it is able to go up with the escalator that you're standing on. The conveyor belt is pulling your arm up faster than your body. So that is going to so that is the main reason why wind shear does tear apart hurricanes and why it is a hurricane's kryptonite. So that's why we don't want wind shear if you do want a hurricane. But this cold front and this trough and all the wind shear that we see from this trough is going to significantly weaken Hurricane Lee. And you can see that we are expected to have a little bit more of a westward shift on Hurricane Lee. You can see that the eye or low pressure system, the main low pressure of Hurricane Lee, is going to be a little bit out to the east, as well as all that rain is going to be out to the west of that low pressure system. So we could definitely see tons of flash flooding from this across Maine. Mainly Maine, we are expected to see the possibility of direct impacts from Tropical Storm Lee. It is expected impact is either a Cat 1 or a tropical storm, possibly a low end Cat 1 to upper end to mid end tropical storm. You can see overall for Massachusetts and Rhode Island and Connecticut and maybe parts of coastal New Hampshire, you can see mainly along the coast of those states, you can see that we do have a little bit of rain, and we could also maybe see the possibility of some higher tides and the possibility of some rip current across that region. But overall, we aren't expected to see all that much of a possibility for flash flooding, but we could maybe see some flooding in some low-lying areas. So do keep that in mind if you do live in some of the areas that aren't expected to see direct impacts from Hurricane Lee. But as for the areas that are going to see direct impacts from Hurricane Lee, mainly Maine, we are expected to see tons of rainfall across that region, and mainly the threat of flash flooding is going to stand for Maine with Hurricane Lee. We could also maybe see some higher tides and maybe some rip current as well, but overall the possibility of flash flooding and maybe some damaging winds, as well as maybe some weak storm surge, but overall this is going to be a fairly weak storm when it does impact. But overall, our main threats from Hurricane Lee, if you do live in Maine, is going to be damaging winds and flash flooding and maybe some higher tides. Now that I've told you the weather, please go down to the description and check out the socials for Project Gladiator, and join the Discord for any updates on Project Gladiator. If you live in any of the areas that I covered for today, please stay weather alert for the time being, and hopefully I will be able to see you guys tomorrow with another forecast.